I think we're all trying to figure that. So that's like the $1,000,000 question. I think they have become a legitimate asset class and a legitimate diversification because they offer, in a traditional sense, they offer a higher level of volatility, which means they have a higher upside. And that's why they're a decent diversification to a normal portfolio. What I will say, though, is that there's a lot of limitations with respect to crypto. One is that it's a relatively small asset class, and the other is that in the cash marketplace, it's a pretty dead product, meaning you can't margin it. There's no real derivatives of it, so it's very limited. But it's also the shiny new toy.
But this regulation that has come out, to what extent does it lend more legitimacy, which is exactly what this asset class needs?
Well, what it does is it legitimizes some of the technology, but it also potentially brings digitization and tokenization into play in the coming years. So what it's essentially doing is it's opening up, like, from everything from funding to money transfers to everything else. It's really opening up a door that has been, barely cracked open.
But Tom, we've heard this for so many years. Everything is going to be tokenized.
Yeah.
It's not really happening at large scale, is it? Why not?
You have, in the UK, tough regulators. In the US, we've had tough regulators until this current administration with respect to crypto. So it's really been a regulatory limitation, but the fences are kind of being lowered a little bit.
Yeah, a couple of years back, I was convinced that we'd be buying a stake of the Empire State Building in the Shard. It'd all be tokenized and we could all buy a stake in these famous buildings.
Did you buy one?
No, obviously it was not forthcoming. Some of that got put on ice with all the volatility that we saw. But let me just circle back to what we're seeing in terms of one of the big themes in Europe, and that is the diversification to defense, to infrastructure in Europe. How is this having some bearing on what you're doing in terms of building software platforms? Is it really now a feature where you need to build more appetite for a program here?
Well, obviously globalization is happening every platform and every investor. But
Japanese equities as well, right?
Everything, it doesn't matter. But the cool thing about today's technology and the stuff that we're building, and we're not the only firm building this, but we've been a leader for the last 25 years, is we're introducing from a single platform every single product, so that any single person who's watching the show, as an individual investor, can essentially participate in any single market with any single strategy. And that's something that's always been limited before to various different groups. It's been segregated, and now it's coming to just any individual's portfolio. So we're playing catch up.
Do you want to talk to us about one of the best trades you're seeing right now? What's out there?
Well, that's very subjective, but I'll tell you what I like right now. I'll give you 3 trades that that to me are interesting.
I have my pen poised.
Okay. Well, you talked a lot. I'm watching you guys before I came on. You talked a lot about the bond market and the recent news of the Fed and everything else. I actually love the bonds here because they're cheap relative to stocks. So and they haven't had any kind of rally, and they're on their butts. They're on their lows. And so I like the bond market here, and there's lots of different ways to play the bond market, but it's a very liquid $50 trillion marketplace, mostly futures marketplace, but I like the bond market. And if you're going to stay in the commodity world, I also like the short side. I know there's been a lot of news on it, but I'm a contrarian. I like the short side of gold and crude oil here. I like both shorts. And this morning, gold's down a little bit, and crude oil is pretty much unchanged. But they're both pretty rich on a relative basis.
Thank goodness someone is on the other side of this trade.
Good. And then in the stock market, it's obviously very mixed. I think some of the tech stocks are rich right now, but I also think there's a few that on a relative basis, some of the big names that are cheap. And I think, for example, I think Apple's cheap relative to, for example, Meta or Microsoft if you're looking at some of the big 7.